Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we're discussing 3 cold case missing persons cases. As always, covering these cases and shedding some light on them might be the final piece of a puzzle needed to solve these cases. But with that being said, let's get into it. Number 3. Susan Marie Powell. It was 1999. Cosmetology student Susan Cox met Joshua Powell at a dinner party in Tacoma, Washington. Joshua and Susan were devout followers of the Church of Jesus of Latter-day Saints, and the spark between the two was undeniable. Friends close to the couple claim that within a few days of meeting each other, Joshua had already proposed and the two had set in motion plans to spend the rest of their lives together. Susan was utterly smitten with Josh, and in 2001 the pair got married in a traditional LDS ceremony. Following their marriage, the two moved in with Josh's father, Stephen Powell, in South Hill, Puyallup, Utah. Stephen welcomed his daughter-in-law with open arms, but his behavior soon took a turn for the worse. Susan had gotten a job as a broker at Wells Fargo, and to the outside world all seemed well. Josh and Susan were thriving, but behind closed doors, evil was lurking. Stephen had taken a particular liking to Susan. In the 3 years the couple lived with him, his behavior escalated to stealing her underwear to filming her without her consent. Susan was disgusted by Stephen's behavior and attitude towards her, and things came to a head when she discovered he'd been writing love songs dedicated to her. He would later tell the Today Show, quote, "I wasn't going to turn down an opportunity with this beautiful woman, even though she's my son's wife." One of the songs, titled "Waiting for You," included lyrics such as, quote, "I could be getting a mistaken impression. Each time you seem to gaze at me, you let me touch you softly. Why is the question and the effect amazes me." In 2004, the Powells were relieved when they moved to West Valley City and finally got away from Stephen. Little did Susan know that Stephen's bizarre behavior was just the tip of the iceberg. She had jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire. The fire being Josh's controlling and abusive behavior. Now that the two were alone, Josh exerted complete control over his wife, making her life miserable. He began to withdraw from the LDS Church, something that Susan was passionate about, and he remained in close contact with his father Stephen despite his inappropriate behavior towards Susan. By 2007, Susan and Josh had welcomed 2 sons, Charles, born 2005, and Braden, born 2007. Susan dove headfirst into motherhood and was known to be a loving and devoted mother. She juggled her job as a broker with her job as a parent, whilst Josh was in between jobs. It was apparent to those outside the marriage that cracks were beginning to show. Susan was the primary breadwinner, and Josh was living a lifestyle well beyond their means. Josh's spending habits and withdrawal from the LDS Church began to grate on Susan, and the pair became distant. Susan recorded a disturbing video in which she said, "This is me, July 29th, 2008, covering all my bases, making sure that if anything happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented."
July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible.
She panned the camera around the home, but it was clear that Susan's message had a double meaning. Como News reported that in June 2008, Susan had written a new will in secret. The will in part read, quote, "I want it to be documented somewhere that there is extreme turmoil in our marriage. Josh threatened that if we get a divorce, there will be no lawyers, only a church mediator, and I will ruin you." She also stated that Josh had told her, quote, "You, Susan, will be destroyed and your life would be over and the boys will not grow up with a mom and dad." Final paragraph chillingly read, quote, "If I die, it was not an accident, even if it looks like one." Just over a year later, Susan Powell disappeared under mysterious circumstances. December 6, 2009 started like any other day for the Powells. Susan took her children to a church service before returning home. News outlet The deserter provided an in-depth timeline of Susan's last known movements. The last person to see Susan was a neighbor who saw her around 5 p.m. Susan had made dinner for the family before taking a nap as she felt unwell. After this, what happened to Susan remains a complete mystery. The next day, on December 7, 2009, the West Valley City Police Department received a call from a babysitter of Charles and Braden. The pair failed to attend daycare that morning, and Josh and Susan were both unreachable. Their families had also tried to contact them to no avail. The West Valley City Police Department quickly began the search for the Powell family, fearing that the worst may have occurred. Hours later at 5 p.m., Joshua and the boys returned to the West Valley family home without Susan. Josh's behavior was noted as very strange and erratic, and when officers entered the house earlier that day, they found that 2 fans had been blowing on a wet spot on the carpet. Susan's purse, wallet, and ID and bank cards were found inside the home, but her cell phone was missing. Upon his return, Josh told the investigators a bizarre story of how he had whisked his kids away on a late-night camping trip to Simpson Springs in Utah. He claimed that Susan had been asleep when he left because she felt unwell. Investigators found that hard to believe that Josh had taken 2 small children into the woods in the freezing December weather. Data indicated that on December 7th, Utah experienced highs of 7 degrees Celsius or 44 Fahrenheit, and lows of negative 17 Celsius and 1 degree Fahrenheit, with blizzard-like conditions. Investigators ordered a further examination of the Powell home, and at this time they found 2 crucial clues. Firstly was Susan's phone, which was found in the car Joshua had used on December 7th to take his kids camping. When questioned, Charles and Braden agreed that they'd been camping, but only after encouragement from their father. Second, forensic investigators found a blood stain on the carpet, and a DNA test proved that it belonged to Susan. There was still insufficient evidence for investigators to press charges, and the search continued. They also found life insurance policies for Susan worth over $1 million, and Susan's privately stashed will, letter, and video. Josh tried to return to normal following Susan's disappearance, despite the circumstances and the media circus that followed. News outlets quickly discovered Stephen's bizarre obsession with his daughter-in-law Susan, and soon the blame began to fall on Josh. Charles and Braden gave chilling accounts of what happened that cold December evening once they were away from the influence of their father. Charles told a teacher that Susan had been with them on their camping trip, but that she hadn't been alive. Braden also drew a picture of the van, similar to the Chrysler minivan the Powells owned, with the picture depicting his mother sleeping in the trunk of the car. Things would take a sickening turn in 2011 when the full scope of Stephen's obsession was revealed after he was arrested for voyeurism, inappropriate child materials. It was also around this time that Josh lost custody of his 2 sons, and they were placed in the care of their maternal grandparents. Investigators slowly began piecing together the puzzle and getting closer to arresting Josh. It became evident to investigators that Josh was a narcissist who emotionally abused his wife and controlled her life, but the unthinkable would happen before action could be taken. February 5, 2012 is a date that Susan's parents will never forget. That afternoon, Elizabeth Griffin Hall arrived at Josh's home with Charles and Braden for a supervised visit. Psychologist Dr. James Manley, who had undertaken Josh's psychological evaluation, noted that he suffered with adjustment disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. Before Elizabeth could enter the door, Josh slammed it in her face. She heard the locks clicking from inside and immediately began to bang on the door. She told Josh to let her inside and desperately called 911 to get some backup. Elizabeth stood on the side of the road outside of the home, waiting for the police to arrive to retrieve the children. Just minutes later, the Powell home exploded and erupted in flames. Charles Joshua Powell was 7 years old. Braden Timothy Powell was just 5 years old. Emergency responders arrived, but it was too late. Investigators found that Josh had taken an axe to his sons before dousing them in gasoline and setting the home on fire. He had sent an email to his lawyer stating that he was sorry, and he also sent goodbye messages to his family.
There are two overwhelming emotions out here this morning, deep, deep sadness and also anger. Anger that these two little boys couldn't somehow be protected from their father, a man that so many people feared was a killer. The fire and apparent explosion was so powerful it shook neighbors' homes and sent bits of insulation from the house raining down on the neighborhood.
All of a sudden, the house shook and I ran outside and you can see this black smoke.
Minutes earlier, just before 12:30 Sunday afternoon, 7-year-old Charles and 5-year-old Braden Powell had been escorted into the home by a caseworker for a court-ordered visitation with their father, Josh Powell. Police say Powell forced the caseworker out, locked the doors. She saw flames and called 911, just as a series of blasts tore the house apart. Across town, Josh Powell's attorney says he received an email from Josh stamped 12:05. It was 3 words: "I'm sorry. Goodbye."
This wasn't tragic. This was deeply wrong. This was evil. You do not kill little kids.
Police found 3 bodies in the center of the rubble, 2 children and an adult. They say there is no doubt that Josh Powell wanted to end his life and take his little boys with him, and say an accelerant was used to make the house burn quickly.
He grabbed the kids, locked her out of the house, and immediately the house went up in flames.
There he is. There he is. You see him?
Sources tell ABC News Powell's mood had changed drastically in recent days. He was more calm than usual, but also seemed excited about the future.
All right, come on.
He was last seen in public at this custody hearing on Wednesday, during which a judge ordered him to undergo a psychological examination and lie detector test while the kids remained with his missing wife's parents.
We're happy to have him with us. We want the best for the kids.
The decision was a blow to Powell, who recently lost custody of the 2 boys and remained the only person of interest in the disappearance of his wife, Susan. Josh told police that he last saw his wife around midnight in December of 2009 before taking his 2 sons on a late-night camping trip in the Utah desert.
You know, I got out to a pretty late start.
This morning, the Cox family, which first lost a daughter, is now dealing with the almost unbearable deaths of their grandsons.
Investigators were heartbroken by the conclusion of this bizarre situation. In 2013, Michael Powell, Josh's brother, who was also believed to have some involvement, also took his own life. Almost all possible suspects and witnesses in Susan's disappearance are now gone. Stephen didn't provide the police with any valuable information, and following his release in 2017, he too would pass away due to natural causes. This investigation had led the police on a wild goose chase, and despite thousands of dollars in cutting-edge techniques, the West Valley City Police Department were no closer to solving this case than they were in 2009. Investigators believe Susan's body may be buried somewhere in Simpson Springs or the surrounding Utah wilderness. With all potential witnesses and suspects now deceased, investigators are holding out for new information or evidence to surface. Susan's disappearance encompasses so many bizarre tales and stories, and it's hard to discern what is the truth and what is a red herring. Susan Marie Powell is described as a white female with brown highlighted hair, blue eyes, 5'4", and 130 pounds. She was last seen wearing a long-sleeved black shirt and black dress pants. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective David Greco of the West Valley City Police Department. Number 2. Angela Mae Meeker. Angela Mae Meeker was just 2 days away from her 14th birthday when she disappeared on July 7, 1979. Angela, who lived in Tacoma, Washington, was known to be a bright and outstanding young student. At the time of her disappearance, she was in junior high and was doing well. That afternoon, Angela headed to the Tacoma Mall to buy a birthday card for her friend. A friend of Angela's would later come forward, telling investigators that he had spotted Angela walking on the side of the road. This friend rolled down his window and discovered that Angela was headed for the mall. He offered her a ride, and Angela jumped into the passenger seat. According to this friend, he dropped her off outside the Payless store close to the mall. This is believed to have been the last time she was seen. Angela never turned up for her joint birthday party that evening. Angela's mother knew that her daughter frequently disappeared for a few days at a time, but she eventually always returned. When Angela's birthday passed and there was still no sign of her, her family reported her missing to the Tacoma Police Department. They too were wary of Angela's past behavior, but her mother convinced them that this time was different. She felt it in her gut. As reported by the Charlie Project, it would take 2 years for Angela to be listed as a missing person. Not much is known about the subsequent investigation, but at one time it was believed that she was another victim of the Green River killer, Gary Ridgway. However, there's no concrete evidence to back up this theory. A local news reported that 6 months after Angela's disappearance, another 13-year-old went missing. This girl was found murdered 12 days later. Angela was known to hitchhike, and her mother believes that she may have hitchhiked on the day that she disappeared. Until Angela's body is found, it's almost impossible to speculate what happened. As the years have passed, Angela's case has grown colder and colder. Very few leads and tips come into the Tacoma Police Department, but they believe someone out there knows something. They told the media, quote, "If there are people who knew Angie that might have any information about what was going on in her life at the time, relationship she was in, if they have any information or even speculation about what happened to her, I'd be interested in hearing about it." If still alive today, Angela Mae Meeker would be 57 years old. Angela is described as a Caucasian female with blonde brown hair, hazel eyes, 5'1" to 5'2", and 100 to 109 pounds. She has a dark mole on her left side of her mouth, and she was last seen wearing black floral shirt, a blue and black satin jacket, blue jeans, sandals, and a black felt hat with red feathers. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Tacoma Police Department. Number 1. Anthony Murrill. 9-year-old Anthony Murrill was last seen at his home on Sells Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia on November 14, 1971. At the time, the area where Anthony lived, Harris Homes, was a housing project that housed hundreds of low-income families. It was a tight fit in the apartment for Anthony and his family. It had been reported that he shared a room with his 13-year-old brother, and the two had bunk beds. Also in the home were Anthony's mother and stepfather. On the evening of November 14th, Anthony climbed into the top bunk of his bed and drifted off to sleep. His 13-year-old brother took the bottom bunk, and the two were expecting a peaceful night's sleep. When Anthony's brother awoke the next morning, he was horrified to find his brother was missing. He immediately notified his mother, and they searched the entire apartment and the apartment complex. After calling around, they couldn't find anyone who had seen Anthony, and the Murrills went to the Atlanta Police Department. Unfortunately, the Atlanta PD classified Anthony's case as a runaway, even though he was just 9 years old. There was no sign of a struggle in his bedroom, and his older brother did not report hearing anything suspicious in the night. Anthony and his family originally hailed from North Carolina, and the Atlanta PD believed that the 9-year-old had somehow traveled back to North Carolina to be with relatives. His mother, of course, refuted this, but the police refused to listen. When the police failed to find any sign of Anthony in Georgia or North Carolina, they finally listed him as a missing person. Whilst Anthony's mother said that her son had no reason to run away from home, Anthony's brother told a different story. His brother claimed that their stepfather was violent and had even once stabbed their mother. Anthony's brother does not believe that he ran away from home and believes that his stepfather likely holds answers to what had happened to him. If Anthony was still alive, he would be 61 years old. At the time of his disappearance, he was described as a black male with black hair, black eyes, 5'2", and 95 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Atlanta Police Department. Well, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way is to hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel are by joining my Patreon or channel membership. I also have merch available, and you will find all that in links in the description box, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very appreciated. But that's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.